is your captain speaking. Is there a doctor, a nurse, or a paramedic on board? Please can you make yourself known to the cabin crew?
That sounds like me, and I think I need to help. This is that story. So I was on a 9-hour flight from the UK to the Caribbean to go on holiday with my family. Around 6 hours into the flight, there was that announcement. And so I made myself known. I stood up and I said to one of the cabin crew who was passing by, "Hi, I'm a doctor." She replied, "A doctor of what?" And then I was thinking, as if a doctor of philosophy has stood up and thought, you know what? I think I can help in this situation. I kind of ignored it and I said, "I'm a doctor of medicine. Can I help?" And she was like, "Oh, thank you. Please come with me." So I went to the front of the plane. Arriving at the front of the plane and responding to the call were 3 other doctors. So there were 4 of us in total. There was a member of cabin crew who took me up there who happened to be an ex-nurse. There was myself, a GP trainee. There was a GP who was an elderly lady. And then there was a couple. One was a hematology consultant. The other was an ophthalmologist, so a surgeon. And they were both a little bit older. The nurse said to us that there is a patient on the plane who is having a hypoglycemic incident. She's a type 1 diabetic on insulin. They can't get her blood sugars up. Her blood sugars are about 1.9 and she's constantly vomiting. She's shaking and she's really not well. The reason that hypoglycemia is so important, or low blood sugars, is that it can lead to confusion, to dizziness, to headaches. It can lead to a coma. It can lead to seizures, and it can actually lead to death. So it's a real medical emergency and something you get taught and drilled into you as a doctor at medical school and also as a new doctor covering the wards. Immediately, the hematology and ophthalmology consultant says, "There's 2 of the doctors here. This isn't something we know much about anymore. I think you guys are capable of dealing with this." And so they left. So that left me, the other GP, and also the ex-nurse that was there. So they'd already given this patient 4 glucose tablets, dissolvable glucose tablets, and some Bucostem because she was feeling sick, which is sometimes used for travel sickness. This hadn't helped and she had vomited things up again and they just couldn't bring her blood sugars up. So I went to introduce myself to the patient. She is lying there, she's conscious, she's talking, but she is visibly shaking. She's lying flat in a first class cabin and she's got her friend next to her. Because this is something I encounter all of the time on call during the wards as a doctor, the GP that was there was taking a backseat while I talked to the patient. So she explained that she's a type 1 diabetic, she's normally takes insulin, and that her blood sugars have been low all day. Since she's been on the flight, she's been vomiting because she's been travel sick. On top of that, she's not been able to take anything sugary, which means her blood sugars have just kept going down. Her blood sugar from a few hours ago was 1.9, which is really low. The other problem they had is that she'd been having this short-acting glucose, like glucose tablets, but no long-acting carbohydrates. So the blood sugars would come up and then just come plummeting down again. So on the plane, they have pretty much everything to do a normal set of observations. They have a manual blood pressure cuff with a stethoscope, so I'm able to take a normal blood pressure, and her blood pressure was 108 systolic, which is okay. I took her pulse rate and she was slightly tachycardic at about 100. I would normally assess this patient with like an ABCDE approach, but because we've got a good idea of what's happening already, we kind of need to get on with the management. Then the situation gets even more high pressured because the cabin crew says to us, "Can you fix this situation? If not, we need to land the plane in Antigua. Tell us, do you want us to land the plane in Antigua?" We just arrived at this point, so I said, hold on for a second, let's try and see what we can do to help this patient. At this point, she's still talking and she wasn't actively vomiting. So can she take anything orally? If not, can we give her anything intravenously? So apparently the way it works giving medications on planes is they have a box of medications they can use, but they need to get an okay from the controller on the ground, a medical team on the ground to say it's found to use any of the medications that they've got. Even things like glucogel and glucose tablets, they need it okayed from the ground to say that they're happy to give it. This is a British Airways flight, by the way, so it's not one of these cheapo airline carriers. And the kind of medical kit they had on the plane was really good, but I'll come on to that in a second. So immediately we decided to give this girl some more glucose tablets. She'd already had 4 or 5, she'd vomited, but she was conscious, so she can take some more. So we gave her some glucose tablets. I then said, well, she needs some longer acting carbohydrates. And they had some bread, they had some scones there, and I thought that would be perfect. So they made her 2 scones with jam. She ate these glucose glucose tablets and ate these scones with jam, and then was feeling a little bit better. We checked her blood sugars again, and it was coming up to about 2.5. A few minutes later, we sat her up to try and give her a sip of Coke, because Coke's really sugary and can help increase her blood sugars as well, and she vomited again. But she didn't vomit everything that she'd had. Now, fortunately for us, she's got one of these blood sugar sensors on her, and she's got a phone app that can scan it and tell us what her blood sugars are. So that's really helpful in telling us what our blood sugars are. We can have a look at the trend then as well. We can see that it's been low all day, we can see when it's been low, we can see when it's come up with the treatment and when it's come down again when she's been sick. Our blood sugar at this point is still coming up to around 3, and I'm thinking we've got two options. We can either decide we need to give her some sugar that's not going in her mouth so she's able to keep it down. Either something IM, if they've got medication we can give like that, or I need to put a cannula in and put a drip up of some glucose. So those are the things I'm thinking in my head. The alternative to that is there something we can do to stop her vomiting? If so, she's still talking and we can still give her things orally. So I spoke to the patient, and the main thing for her was that she just couldn't keep anything down. So I went to the medication box and had a look at what they had. They have a list of all of the medications they've got, and on this flight they pretty much had everything. They've got aspirin, they've got dexamethasone, steroid, they've got adrenalines, they have got loads of other medications, but the ones I was looking at were the antiemetics, the anti-sickness medications, and they had metoclopramide, which is a medication that I know can be given into a muscle to help stop vomiting. The ex-nurse from the cabin crew said, anything that is in this box, you're free to take, but I'm not allowed to touch any of it at all. So if you do and you use any of it, you need to sign here with your name, your GMC number, and sign it, and you can take what you want. And you need to draw it up yourself as well. Bear in mind, when you're in a hospital, this is a lot of the stuff that the nurses do, is drawing up the medications, checking the doses, mixing everything up before they end up giving it. I do a lot of the prescribing, but I don't do that so much. Obviously, this is a situation where there's no one else who can do it, so you have to do it. So I went through the box, I picked out an ampule of metoclopramide, I checked the dose on it, and they've also got almost like a printout of the BNF with all of the medication doses. Luckily, I also have the BNF app offline on my phone, so I'm able to check all of the doses anyway. So I checked the doses of metoclopramide, I checked the doses of the glucose tablets and how frequently we're meant to be giving them, and I flicked the cap off this glass ampule. I opened up a syringe, I opened up a needle, I drew it up, I opened up another needle to inject with, I cleaned my hands obviously, I cleaned the skin, and then we gave her an intramuscular injection of metoclopramide. At this point, she still isn't that well. She's still kind of a little bit drowsy, she's still staking a lot, she's a tiny bit confused. So even though I've given this medication, I'm thinking maybe she needs some glucose, some extra glucose to try and bring this up. But she has managed to keep a little bit more of this long-acting carbohydrate down. And over the next 5 or 10 minutes or so, her blood sugars start to creep up even more. And it gets to a point where her blood sugars are 5. She's now not feeling sick anymore, 10 or 15 minutes after having the metoclopramide. And I say to the cabin crew, we can carry on to the Caribbean. We do not need to stop in Antigua. We can carry on going to St. Lucia. The other thing I was really wary of being on this flight is, firstly, am I insured to do anything? So if something goes wrong, if I give a medication and someone has a reaction to it or something, am I insured against that happening? That's number one. Number two is, I need to be really careful. I don't know this patient, I don't know their medical history, I don't know anything else. I need to check their allergies carefully and triple check everything I'm doing. So everything I did, I double checked with the GP. I said, this is what I'm doing, check this ampule. She checked the dates for me with me. I drew it all up, I gave it to her, and just made sure that everyone around was clear that this is what I was doing and that is why I was doing it, just to make sure everything was covered and that everyone was in agreement. At the end of the day, this patient was sat nicely in first class, her blood sugars were coming up and that she was feeling better, but I'm just thinking, if things hadn't got better, what would the next steps have been? I found it really interesting and quite annoying that anything you wanted to use, they had to get clearance from the ground. So when I said I want to use this metoclopramide, they had to call the ground, get the clearance from the medical team there, and then I could use it. So there was a delay there of maybe 5 or 10 minutes. For that medication, fine, no problem. But they needed the same clearance just for glucose gel. So really that's something they should just be able to give, and everyone should be trained in just giving that. After this whole thing finished, I was probably there for an hour or two sorting this out, which is quite a big proportion of the flight. They said to me, you know, can you please leave your name and your telephone number, which I did. And then I went back to my seat and I obviously said, if things get worse again, if you need anything, then please let me know. And when the plane landed in the destination it was meant to go to, this patient went straight to the hospital. So good outcome in the end. I don't know what they did with my name and my number because I never got called. I never heard anything about it again. I never got a call to say this is how the person is, to say thank you for doing it or anything, even though I spent hours there. And obviously that's not the reason you do it, but I guess it would have been nice to get an email to say thank you for helping on this flight, thank you for not making us land in Antigua and letting us get to our final destination. But hey, I guess as a doctor you are always on duty, and I'm surprised at how much I remember from being a junior doctor covering the wards and looking after hypoglycemic patients. I hope you enjoyed this story time. Thank you, if you ever see this, to the ex-nurse, the BA cabin crew and the GP who was there helping throughout. And if the patient ever sees this, I hope you are well and that your blood sugars are better controlled than they were on that flight. Take care. If you are new, please subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in the next video.